hope that they don't even know we're happy about what's working.
Oh, actually?
Okay? Yes, because then they wouldn't change.
And you don't see the expression on their face of despair and...
That's not my concern. Okay? My concern is where the ball is and what shots they're making. Their face sometimes lies about what they're really feeling. So,
really?
Yeah, I don't want to go by what their face is. If I know that I'm hitting a good shot and they're mishitting the ball in such a way that they're uncomfortable, they don't have to look at me. I don't have to see their face. I know I'm making them uncomfortable by calculatingly performing a game plan to play a certain man or hit a certain shot. I know, based upon the fact that if they do it to me, I would be uncomfortable. So It's really not a matter of knowing or looking at them and seeing they're unhappy, because they could very well hit the next shot and roll the ball out and make a point. It's having the confidence, and this is the problem with most ball players, having the confidence to know that they are genuinely making the other player uncomfortable without any guidelines.
You know, that's marvelous, because if you did it in life, everybody would hate you.
Well, you know, the objective in life is different.
Right.
In sports, the objective is to make the other team uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's all you want to do. Even if it's by 1 inch, that's your objective.
Now, how do you combine, you know, the kind of ferocity and focus that you have to be competitive with this kind of lack of emotion, almost a kind of a flattened quality that you have at the same time that you're completely focused in a primal way?
Well, that's difficult. That's why there's so few great handball players and so few great boxers and so few great tennis players. The one-on-one especially is where the emotions are very key, and the players, competitors with their greatest control of the emotions are the best. In one-on-one competition, it's just that finest line. The greatest tennis, all the great tennis players hit this great serves, they hit great pass shots, but it's the guy or the woman who has complete control of their emotions. At the moment they have to make the shot, they perform the shot uninhibited. And the same thing in boxing. People, as opposed to what most people think, boxers are not undisciplined. It takes tremendous discipline to be a fighter, because two things happen. Fighters get excited, like most people. In the ring, there's a lot of excitement. They're nervous, they're afraid, there's fear, and they have to have control over that. So that if they get hit with a big bomb, they have to be very calm not to get hit again. That's when they have to be very calm. And when they land a big bomb on the other guy, usually you see amateurs, when they land a big punch, start flailing away. That's when they have to be very calm. When you get hit, so you don't get hit again, and when you land a big bomb, not to lose the opportunity and not to lose the opening. You have to be very disciplined, like a doctor picking the openings to hit. So it's the emotions that need a lot of control.
You know, I'm just wondering, are there aspects of life outside the arena, in either handball or boxing, where these virtues have survival value or good, you know?
Well, those control of the emotions are indispensable in every area. You know, a piano player, in order to become a concert pianist, must go through this. Nobody gets there the first day and walks on stage and feels natural. They feel that nervousness, but eventually they get on stage and they perform well. And they know that little bit of edge, that excitement is what they live for. You know, fighters, most of them, I should say all of them, walking in the ring, there's a tremendous thrill. Some of them would rather just fight that moment. They'd rather not have all the spectacle. You know, fighters like Sugar Ray Leonard walk in the ring and they look out there and they love this. They love this. Other fighters like Mike Tyson rather just get it on right then. Fight's over, now I'm okay. It's that moment. So, but in every profession, in every endeavor, that control of the emotions is very key, and you know, and inhibiting your abilities inhibition comes from the lack of control of emotion. So for a pianist, for a doctor operating, for a singer, in any way, conducting a seminar, anything, the control of the emotion is key.
So then, is it fair to say that handball is a kind of a ritual of refinement of the excellence of the spirit?
Well, I don't know what that means. That's pretty deep.
I'm just following out your thought.
Yeah.
That's all.
I don't know about. Can you say that one more time?
Sure. If the feelings of control and mastery are applicable to all situations in life, isn't it fair to look upon handball as a kind of a teaching place, a kind of an arena of learning and of how to master life itself?
Well, as it is in everything that's a competition. Once you add the element of performance in any way, whether it's cooking a meal or singing or taking a test in school or anything that is qualitative or quantitative in any way, there's pressure. You know, cooking a meal, taking a test, tennis player, going in front of a job applicant, getting in front of someone that wants to hear what you have to say about a certain job. Anything that requires some qualitative or quantitative effort has pressure.
Yeah.
So if you endure that enough, if you go through it enough, if you practice it enough, in every endeavor you get used to it. Every tennis player got used to it, every handball player got used to it, every boxer, no one died from it. They all got used to it. Some get used to it a little better and a little quicker. Some get tremendous control. Those are the masters. And there's very few masters. There's very few Muhammad Alis and Sugar Ray Leonards and Boris Beckers. They're very few. Those are the masters of their endeavors. And that's where you attempt to be, but everyone has the limit of their control. You know, but that happens in every profession. So the question is yes. The answer is yes. Handball does give you a qualitative way of seeing how you control your emotions. Right. And it gives you a little bit of an edge over everyone else because under that pressure, while other areas of life will affect you differently and may make you nervous, handball gives you a sense, I'll live. You know, it's 20 up, it's match point, there's pressure, there's people watching, here comes the shot, there's pressure, you survive. And that goes over a little bit to other areas, a little bit. It's not exactly the same as being in front of a group of people and having to sing on stage. If you're a great handball player, it will not keep you from getting nervous being a great singer, even though you can sing, because that's a different venue, it's a different arena. So it's a little bit different, but fear is fear. You get a little bit more used to it, a little bit more used to it.
Now, the ritual, as I understand it in handball, as opposed, let's say, to singing or playing the piano, or a lot of other situations in life, is power and dominance. Aren't those the central, you know, it's almost like Homer in a way. You know, the issue is who is the most powerful, who can dominate, who can create reality.
Well, fear is controlled. Your emotions have to be controlled whether you go on the stage or you go on a handball court. On the stage, the fear is completely internal and produced completely internal. There's nothing happening out there that is making you more or less emotional. It's completely within your control. There's no physical, quantitative analysis happening all the time other than your voice. Now, if the audience hears you sing perfectly, then they think you're in control. If you miss a note or miss a piano beat, they know that something's awry. On a handball court or in a baseball field or in a football field, there's a physical aspect that's happening that adds another dimension. Now there's a new dimension of motion.
It's adversarial.
Well, there's competition. That's the problem. And it's competition from something from above and around you. It's a little different. It's a little different. Some people say it takes more discipline to be internal, for a billiard player to make the shot, or a golfer to hit the ball. You know, if the golf ball was being thrown at them and then they had to hit it, it'd be a little different. But I don't know which is. It's still fear, and probably, I'm sure, the great thinkers would say the fear is exactly the same. There's no more fear from having been in a handball court and having the ball rocket around than there is for a singer to get on stage and have to face an audience for the first time. Because the fear is exactly the same. It's just a different bit of physical effort involved.
As you've grown older, have you changed in the emotional attitudes that you have toward handball? Are you more mellow? Are you?
Well, the area of competition is no longer there. So it's more of a fun now to get on the court and play. competition is very painful. You know, it's painful emotionally, it's painful physically, waiting for the matches, playing guys, having the competition, having them fight back, points after points. It used to be fun, and it would be like, you know, proving yourself and being the man. And that used to be terrific. But no, now I'd rather just get on the court and play for fun. That's the best part.
Yeah. So you have, could you describe, could you describe for us a little bit of the personality of Jimmy Jacobs, whom we've heard so much about?
Well, Jim was a master of himself and the sports he played, particularly in handball. He was the first handball player to speak about how the emotions control how you play in the court. The very first one. The same way that a person like Customado, as a trainer, would be the first one as a teacher, trainer of boxers, to let fighters know that their emotions are a key element of how they perform in the ring. Trainers and teachers before that time would never tell their fighters it's okay to be or have fear. That was unheard of until Customado came along. For Jim, it's the same thing. He knew that emotions control the way handball players play. And he developed a way of playing handball that was a cerebral game.
He was a real cerebral player, I must say.
His objective was to get on the court and win. Not how good he looked, not what the crowd thought. His objective was to get on the court, make the other player feel uncomfortable. Just the same as we got back to the original, what we said originally. His objective was to make the player feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And he did it masterfully by adding a new dimension to the game, shots that had never been done before. So he was a master of the handball, and that, of course, took place and was able to permeate other things he did.
Could you tell us the shots that he invented that were never done before?
There were two things that he did on the court that were key. Number one, he developed a ceiling punch ball.
Really?
Yes.
I never saw it.
Yeah, he was a ceiling punch ball with his left hand and with his right hand. And he was the first handball player to effectively use an overhand ceiling game as an offensive tool. Up until that point, very few or none of the ball players used an overhand ceiling game, mostly because the courts were so big that Jim came along at a point in time in 1953-54 when the first 20 by 40 courts with a ceiling were developed and built, that he was able to improvise a ceiling game, and that became an offensive weapon. From then on, every ball player had to use a ceiling game to be able to stay in there with him.
Right. Now, it seemed to me he tried to work for a perfect kind of technique to have no errors. He took always very high percentage shots. He was completely focused on exactly what you had to do to score the most points. It was amazing. I mean, no, he didn't try to be graceful. He didn't play to the crowd or anything like that.
It's true. There probably are players in other sports that would be comparable. Come to mind, it would be Boris Becker in tennis. Bang, every ball goes back until he gets the perfect shot, then he goes for it. As opposed to like a John McEnroe style play where he attacks the net and goes for incredible shots, making some and looking spectacular, and some other times missing them. So Becker would be an example to the public of what Jim played like as a handball player, perhaps with a little more flair, because Jim added an element of hooking the ball, which really made it very difficult on the other ball players. In addition to his finely tuned discipline, he threw in an element which they were very uncomfortable with, of hooking the ball in the volleys and on the serve. So, but the discipline separated him from everyone else. The complete discipline of not going for any bad shots.
Have you seen that level of excellence in contemporary handball players?
There's a player now in Full, David Chapman, who plays a very, very carefully disciplined game, carefully disciplined. And it'll be interesting because there's a new ball that's being used. It's going to be a little more difficult for him to use that same type of game because the ball is so fast that it gives the guys who are much more physical than he is a chance to hit the ball harder on the serve and score more points. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I don't think Chapman's left hand was as good as Jimmy Jacobs.
Well, while his left hand may not be as good, Chapman really plays everything defensively with his opposite hand. Jim would go for some shots. Of course, the ball players back then that Jim played against were not the caliber of the ball players that Chapman plays against now. There are many more good ball players today. Back then, outside of the top 6 or 8, it really dropped off dramatically. Today, there's a group of players that are really dynamite, and if you take the ball with your opposite hand, and if you have a left like Chapman's, which is not very strong but very proficient defensively, if he tried to shoot the ball, he'd bring the ball up as a setup too many times.
Right.
So he's smart. He doesn't do that. He waits for his good hand.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you a couple last questions. I want to thank you for your patience. Can you think of a boxer, in a situation where there is real danger, you could get your head knocked off, that is as masterful and cerebral as the ideal of the athlete that we're talking about?
Well, you'd have to take a boxer to be comparable to a disciplined handball player like a Chapman or Paul Haber or Jimmy Jacobs. There would be a few. The boxers that would come to mind would be the ones who are not, well, I can't say the word not exciting, because they were exciting, but there are fighters that enter the ring that come to fight. In other words, either you die or I die, but we're going to die right here now. While some other fighters are very talented, champions, sensational fighters, but they're a little more conservative in the ring. They waited a little longer. There were fighters like Benny Leonard, who waited and waited and waited and picked you apart and finally won. Willie Pep, who picked you apart round by round and finally won. Sugar Ray Leonard, at his best, would be very calculating in there, masterful, very disciplined, pick the guy apart, and then finally won.
How about Jack Johnson?
Well, Jack Johnson would be a heavyweight who did the same thing,
Yeah.
exactly. As opposed to those type of fighters, you'd have the Jack Dempseys and the Rocky Marcianos, and of course the most offensive fighter of all time is Mike Tyson. That's a different style. And, but some fighters are a little more conservative. They're disciplined. It takes discipline. Of course, in their own mind, they're not getting hit. And it's a little, in handball, you can try to go for a shot, miss, look bad, but still win the match. In boxing, you can try to land the big bomb, something you're not used to doing early on, try to be exciting, but if you miss, the ball game's over.
Right.
So they had tremendous discipline not to lose their control.
Now, I have the feeling with, in Willie Pep or people like that, or Benny Leonard in the films that I've seen, that they were interested in establishing a mental dominance first. It was only after they did that they started to go into their big numbers.
Well, the mental dominance in any sport has to do with what the other guy is doing to you and what you're doing to him. The fighters that I mentioned were so good, the Willie Peps, the Jack Johnsons, Ray Leonards, that their ability kept the other guy from getting in the fight until they met someone who was an animal and forced them to be uncomfortable.
Like Sandy Sadler.
Like Sandy Sadler, Willie Pep,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that, for fighters that are very, very disciplined, for Ray Leonard, it might have been the first Durant fight, where the guy just was in his face and made him, it was a battle of who can make the other feel more uncomfortable. So most of the time, they have that tremendous edge and ability and the discipline that keeps the other guy away. But sometimes the other guy comes on strong. Then it becomes a real test of wills and skills, which it always is in every sport. And that's when you see who has the greatest discipline. And in boxing, the only factor is you never know when it's going to end. So even the fighters with the great discipline, one shot, the ball game's over.
Right. Okay, I'm going to ask you a last question, Steve. Thank you very much for your patience and this incredibly illuminating quality of ideas that you are presenting here. I would imagine your conversations with Jim Jacobs were tremendous and vintage. Could you speak about the kinds of dialogues that you had with him? I mean, it sounds as if the two of you were on the same...
Well, unfortunately, when we were together for the 25 years, I was learning. And I would ask such stupid questions all the time, whether about handball or boxing or life. And Jim had tremendous patience. No matter how stupid my question was, he'd say, let me explain why that happens. And he was always like with everyone. And he would tell me about handball, about boxing, why that would happen. And he had great teachers also in handball, and he would be the first one to say in handball and boxing, He had great teachers, but he learned. He would be very patient in answering the questions, and over the years I would learn more and more about handball, about boxing, and life. And unfortunately, now that I know a little bit, I have enough knowledge to be able to ask him a question where he'd be able to say, now that's a good question. Let me tell you why and how that works. But he's not around to ask.
Unfortunately.
So now I have enough to be able to ask him a good question about handball or boxing. And he'd say, that's good. Let me tell you why that happens.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Steve Lott, and I'd like to thank you for your ability to handle all the bad questions I asked you.
No, they were very good questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that was good.
Thank you very much.
That was a good interview. Hey, folks, we're speaking to Tati Silveyra, who played a couple of really interesting matches, very different matches. I have to ask you, first of all, you seem to have a comic view of things as you're out there. You smile at certain things, and you seem to have almost a happy-go-lucky attitude that I don't see out there with other players. They're so serious, and you're kind of amused at things. Is that how you feel inside, or is it?
No, that's the way I feel. I have a great time when I play, especially when I'm playing good, because I know I can pretty much do what I want to do when I want to do it.
Yeah, speaking of that, I've never seen the variety of serves and shots. I mean, how many serves you got? About 9 or 11 or something?
Oh, I've got probably, actually, I probably got about over 20.
Over 20?
Yeah.
Right. Now, how do you make that kind of selection of serves with 20 different serves, and a lot of them are driving serves, long serves? How do you make the selection?
I go ahead and I feel my opponent out. If I've been like just driving them, then I'm gonna go ahead and sneak a soft one in there. Or if I've been serving soft to them, then I'm gonna stick a hard drive in there. Kind of keep them off balance, keep them guessing.
That's what I had the feeling with that range of serves. Now, I presume that you had worked on that, right?
Oh yeah, I practiced, I mean, hours and hours and hours of practice.
Yeah, but also you probably thought about how many different kinds of serves you could throw up there and make the guy crazy, right?
Definitely. If I'm serving short, then I'm gonna go ahead and sneak a deep one in, or if I'm serving deep, I'm gonna just keep them off balance.
Now, I saw you, I felt I could read you a little bit. I'll tell you what I saw. You were hitting to Naty's right hand again and again and again, and then every time you went to the left, you kind of looked down a little bit, and then you almost screened the ball, and then you hit it to his left.
Yeah.
And I had the idea that a thought was crossing your mind. Here's what I'm going to do it to him.
Yeah, exactly. You read it loud and clear. Not too many people read it.
I know, but he didn't
None of my
pick it up at
opponents
all.
do.
He didn't pick. Well, actually, it hardly matters if they read you because you hit the ball so hard. I mean, even if they know where it's going.
Yeah.
Now, I have heard that you're a kind of a street player. That if you're hot, there's almost nobody who can beat you.
Yeah.
How do you it's interesting because there are certain players who are consistent and certain players who go into slumps and who are street players. Can you feel the difference between the time that you're hot and that you know everything is going to go in?
Well, yeah, basically I can. When I know it's an important match and you know what, I gotta do it or else, I'm out of the tournament or whatever, or if we're playing for money, then it's a different type of deal there.
So you can actually control the streaking.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the way I look at it, this was, I mean, if it's a fun tournament, then I'll go ahead and just have a good time, practice different shots. And when I play players like this, I'm always playing them, 110%. So it's nice just to lay back a little bit and kind of like analyze their weaknesses. Even though I might be losing or whatever, I'm picking up a little something every single time I play them, and I guess not that competitive tournaments. Or,
I thought you were very relaxed on the court, a lot more relaxed than most players. It's as if you're completely at home here.
Yeah. I was just cruising. I knew I had them. I knew I can make points whenever I want to. And that's where it comes. That's where feeling your opponent comes in. I mean, I don't know. I like just taking my time, relaxing. I'll wait for my opportunity, then I'll unleash.
Had you felt that as Naty started to make these unforced errors toward the end of the game, that you had there been a mental feeling in your mind?
Yeah,
he's doing this,
from the very first point, I knew that I'd get him. Mainly because with Naty Alvarado, he only has one pace a game, and that's fast. And I knew eventually, he'd break down, with mixing it up, hitting the ball a little slower, hitting the ceiling, moving the ball around a little bit. I knew it was just a matter of time.
So you feel he hasn't really got a good court game?
Actually, no, he does have a good court game.
I mean, if you play high
he just doesn't have the patience yet. I think he eventually will develop the patience, and then he's gonna be tough. I mean, he's tough now, but yeah, just another.
Yeah, actually, he was making his points, and you were allowing him to make his points, and you always felt in control of the game at the same time. Yeah. Now, on the day after that, you played John Bike, who was overwhelming today. I don't know what got into John. Had you changed your game? Did you change your attitude?
Well, I went in there and I don't know, for some reason I felt sluggish.
Yeah, right.
And my mind wasn't, I mean, it was like I was half asleep playing in there. He played a great game. He kept me out of the front, which he did really, really well today, this morning.
He really did. Yeah.
And couldn't get him out of the front court, and that made the difference.
That is the difference. But I noticed that you didn't go for a lot of the shots that he was hitting the side and then the wall, and you didn't go for them. And the day before that, you went for all of them.
Yeah. Well, then again, I mean, yesterday I was killing every single ball. Today I'd shoot it, and it was up about 6 inches. So.
Yeah. Also, you weren't able to try to practically everything he hit at John, he was able to hit back at you.
Yeah.
Which has to be pretty discouraging. Right?
Yeah, it was. It's very discouraging. But then again, this is where you practice new shots against players. When, I mean, there's really no real, I mean, the way I look at it, there's not too much pressure on you. Whether you win or lose, as long as you play well.
That's true. You always survive it, don't you?
Yeah.
All right, now, with Naty, you mentioned a weakness. Now, the guy is, if he plays his game, the speed game, it's okay. But he's got a weakness. As far as I can tell, John hasn't got a weakness. Although Albert over here says that his big problem is that he can return everything.
Yeah.
Could you explain that, Albert?
Well, what I said is sometimes that can work as a disadvantage because then it's, well, he was going to give you an answer anyways.
Oh, right, go ahead.
What happens is when he plays a guy like Dave, Dave uses that against him because he just takes him like a yo-yo and sends him around and sends him around and sends him around, and he'd wind up, I think, sometimes, as strong and as good shape as he's in. I'm sure he feels tired eventually, and that can make the difference of whether he's going to win or lose. Maybe he's better off taking a few more risks instead of getting tied up in those situations.
Speaking of that, are you tired today?
Nah, I was just, somewhat. Yes, I was.
Because you look tired.
I was.
And you looked great yesterday. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it makes a big difference when you're mentally tired and when you're ready to play. It makes a big difference.
Now, how did you get into this game?
I first began with my coach, Tony Wante. He had a youth outreach program with handball kids and stuff like that out in East Los Angeles, and I came aboard in his handball team when I was 12 years old.
Had you known at the beginning that you had a gift for this?
No, I didn't. I played